about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
My new book, Echoes of Evil, Unmasking the Minds of Infamous Killers. What would I do if I had the opportunity to go back and interview infamous killers, people who have killed? What if I was able to observe them without them knowing? People like Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, or even earlier than that, Billy the Kid, right? Seth Bullock. People don't know. Wyatt Earp. These people have killed. So I want to talk to them. Hey, what's it like to murder? What is your pre and post offense behaviors? What did you do? What were you thinking? How does it affect you? Do you have remorse? Do you have regret? And I'm able to do that in this book. Okay? Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, The Mafia with Al Capone, Roy DeMeo, Anthony Spilaccio, talk to Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, Timothy McVeigh, okay? The ideologies of some people and why they decide to kill. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, Charles Manson, who may or may not have actually killed anybody. Richard Speck, who killed 8 nurses, all in one night. I took nonfiction, blended it in with fiction, and came up with Echoes of Evil. Order the book, 400 and some odd pages. You will not be disappointed if you like true crime and maybe a little bit of fiction weaved in. Thanks for watching. Ames out. Okay, in today's deep dive, I'd like to talk about the double homicide of Julie and Terry Dade. This occurred in January of 1970, and this occurred in Junction City, Oregon, a place I'm not familiar with at all. Not a lot out there on this case. Again, that's what I like to do on this channel, is cases that don't get the media attention. There's so many missing persons and so many unsolved homicides. It's very difficult, but with the advent, obviously, of social media, it's one of the good things that social media provides. So, for me, to have this platform, this Unsolved No More channel, that's what I want to do, is present these older cases that do not get the attention that they so deserved. So this case was intriguing. It had me thinking a lot. In fact, at my old age of 50, I actually researched this for several hours. Thought I had something. I went to take a nap and I couldn't do that because I couldn't get this out of my mind, and I wanted to get back on it. Some things came to me while I laid down. That usually happens. It happened with that Tony Brown case that we recently did. So anyway, Julie Dade, I think her maiden name was Julie Thompson. She was only 20 years old. Her husband, Terry, was 19 years old. They had an apartment at 151 Maple Street in Junction City. The overview and synopsis of this case is that around 4:50 a.m. on January 21st, 1970, neighbors at a trailer park heard an explosion. Resident comes out, sees his vehicle on fire under a carport, and he tries to extinguish it. And when he's doing that, he sees a body underneath the vehicle. Fire department gets there rather quickly. They extinguish the flames, and they do in fact confirm that a body is underneath this vehicle in this trailer park. Remember that this is 1970. There's no DNA, certainly no rapid DNA technology to figure out who this individual is. She's burnt beyond recognition. They do have to rely on dental records, but that will take a while to come in. In the meantime, the next morning, mid-morning, a child is crying, and police are called to an apartment building at 151 Maple Street, apartment 11. And when they make entry, they see the child who is screaming, and they also see a dead body in the apartment on the bed, and that is Terry Dade. Dental records then confirm that the body underneath the vehicle at the trailer park about several blocks away was in fact his wife, Julie. That's the overview of the case. Very intriguing, right? At least it is for me. So, what do we want to do first? We want to dive into victimology. Not a lot out there on this case, but what I did find out that Terry was not involved in a lot of extracurricular activities while he was in high school. Didn't play sports. Quiet, unassuming, nice guy. He worked at I believe a mill of some sort. I could be wrong on that. Wife, Julie, very attractive and popular in school. She was a homemaker, very tidy. And they just had a child, again, as I mentioned, 1 year of age. That's it. That's it for victimology. Not a lot there. So you're left with kind of, when you don't have victimology, and you'll see as I get to my theory on this, you're left with a lot of assumptions. Okay? Don't like to do that, but this is what we got. It's got what we're going to deal with. So let's get to a timeline. And before we get to the timeline, let me get to the medical examiners and the autopsies. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to read the autopsy reports for this. I wish I would have, and the only reason is initially when police made entry to check on the child, they said that the husband, Terry, was shot with a large caliber handgun in the face. And later at autopsy, they changed that to no, he was beaten with a blunt force object. I would just like to confirm that, but we'll go with what the paper says here, and he was not shot. Julie's autopsy determined that she was also beaten with a blunt force object, and she, in addition to that, was strangled. Now, before we get to that, there's some things that happened in the course of this timeline that is intriguing to me. So let's start off at midnight. Midnight on the 20th, Terry comes home from work. And between midnight and 2, I don't think anybody knows, they go to bed. Okay? But the next step in the timeline, and I'd like to know how police know this, they said that between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m., somebody knocked on the door of their apartment building, and Julie answered. At that time, Julie was knocked unconscious or incapacitated in some way, and the offender continued in and murdered the husband in the bedroom. He then abducts Julie And the next sequence of events, remember, they say this is between 2 and 3:30 a.m. Not sure how they know that. I would really like to know how they know that, whether there's a witness that said they heard the knock or whatever. But that's between 2 and 3:30. Let's say it's 3:30. The next thing we know is at 4:20 a.m. So almost an hour later, a woman who is later confirmed to be Julie, is frantically knocking at a house on Laurel Street, as you can see in this map. So in this map, I have the Maple Street apartment building highlighted. That's where the murder of Terry and the abduction of Julie occurred. As we proceed down on the map, which would be south, down Prairie Road, and a right on Addison Ave, and about 2 houses down, this is where Julie is observed banging on a door, screaming for help. This is observed by 2 people. A person across the street sees it, and the person's house who was being knocked on actually comes to the door as Julie is being dragged back into a vehicle. This is being observed again by someone across the street. The homeowner whose house is being knocked on finally awakens. He comes to the door. He sees the man and she's put in the vehicle. He asks the guy, the offender, is there a problem? What's going on? And he says, she's just drunk. That, for some reason, is telling to me of how smooth this guy is. Secondly, after he puts her in the vehicle, she quiets. Okay? He gets back out of the vehicle, which is a station wagon, and he's searching in the street for something. Okay? With a flashlight. She's not making any more noise. She's in the car, and this is being observed. After a few minutes, he goes and he gets back into the vehicle. Approximately 10 minutes later, as we go further south on the map, there is an explosion at this trailer park here at Bailey Lane and Prairie Road. And that's where they find the body of Julie shoved underneath a random person's vehicle, which coincidentally is also a station wagon. And that's where we're at. Now, if you don't find that intriguing and sad at the same time, I don't know what's wrong with you, because I certainly do. Now, we have 2 crime scenes, right? We have where the abduction and murder of the husband occurred. We can learn a lot from that crime scene itself. Just the location of it. And then we have, obviously, the body of Julie and the explosion of the car as the second crime scene. And we could label that as a body dump location, because police believe that she was already dead and then placed under the vehicle, which I find fascinating as well. So the first thing that we have to do is try to determine, where does this fall? It's certainly homicide. But is it because of greed? Maybe. Is it a sexually motivated crime? Maybe. We need to know more. Revenge. Possibly as well. So how can we deduce which one it is for it to lead to a suspect? Well, it's always in the details. So the first thing that stood out to me, and it took reading over several newspaper articles to find it, and it was how they were dressed. Remember I did the Mary Pewitt case? If I remember, I'll link that at the end of this video, where I believe the way she was dressed told you a lot about the offender. You know, because remember, she answered the door. If she did it in a crop top with no bra or underwear on. And I just felt that, well, whoever did this, if there's no forced entry, she had to feel very comfortable with letting that person in. That plays a little bit into this. She is wearing a robe. Now, remember, it's January. The average temperature for that night was 37 degrees. It's cold. She's not going outside in a robe. Well, we know that, Kenny. She was abducted, right? Okay, but what was she wearing underneath that robe? I don't know. Somebody knows. The autopsy, the police. I don't know. But I will throw an educated guess out there, and I'm going to tell you that she was naked underneath that robe. Now, why would I say that? See, again, it's very important when you say things like this, or make any sort of educated guesses, back it up. Well, what's the reason? You can't just say it. So the reason I say that is because when I went back through the newspaper articles, I found a little section where it said that Terry, the husband, was found naked. And I annotated that because it's important, okay? How people are dressed when they're murdered is very important. May not seem like it, but it is. And in this case, it told me that I believe that she was naked as well. Now, what troubles me, and I have written down here as a red flag, is why is she answering the door in an apartment complex at 3:30 in the morning, or as early as 2 in the morning? Now, I know we're all about gender equality nowadays and non-binary, binary. I don't even know what that shit means. But I do know that in 1970, a man would get up and answer the door at 3 in the morning if somebody is knocking. Do you agree or disagree with that? Now, there's going to be some of you that disagree with that. And again, this is why victimology is very important. What type of person was Terry? Did he avoid conflict? Was he a scaredy cat? Was she more of the aggressor? What? I don't know any of that. But I'm going to assume because of the times, 1970, that he was the man of the house. Remember, she was a homemaker, so it makes sense. Now, I could say, well, he was just so tired from work. But I don't buy that. You're the man of the house. Somebody knocks at the door at that time of night. 1, you're not going to let your wife answer it. 2, you're not going to let her answer it in a robe, are you? Now, he was naked. So then I thought, well, Kenny, maybe that's why he didn't answer. But why was he naked? Does he sleep naked? Maybe. But maybe it's a little bit more than that. Don't you think? You have a 19 and 20-year-old couple living together. He just got off work at midnight. What do you think that they did before they went to bed? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with it. They're a married couple. Even if they weren't married, it doesn't matter. But I'm smart enough to know, as are you, that they more than likely, and I'm going to say probably, had sex. Or were in the midst of having sex. But I think that they were probably done, and were getting ready to sleep or were asleep, and that's why both were naked. However, something happens where she gets out of bed, puts on a robe. Why? She doesn't want to answer the door naked. But we have to figure out why she is answering the door. Listen, nothing good happens at 3 o'clock in the morning when you answer your door. Right? Why is she doing that? See, that's the first hurdle we have to overcome. And as an investigator, that's what you need to focus on. Because that tells you the whole rest of the story. Why does she answer the door? Number one. Number two, she's only wearing a robe. He's naked. Sure, it could very well be, listen, just stay here. I'll put on a robe and go see who it is. But I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. Any self-respecting, decent husband, man in general, gets up because of the potential of danger at 3 o'clock in the morning, answers that door. Unless, what? You're expecting somebody. But if they were expecting somebody, would they be naked? She has the robe on, but she's naked underneath it, is my guess. No. So you're not expecting anybody. But something happened. Somebody came in. So it got me thinking. Who, what, why would come to that door at 3:30 in the morning on a Tuesday night? That was big to me. A Tuesday night. Sometimes Friday nights, Saturday nights, you get some drunken individuals. Yeah, but Tuesday is an odd day. Listen, I understand murder can happen on any day. But for a premeditated murder, which this is, to happen on a Tuesday is tough. Now, how do I know that's premeditated, you ask? Well, it's all about the selection of a weapon, okay? A person who plans on murder more than likely will bring a weapon. Not always. When murder is not premeditated and it happens spontaneous to rage, it is most times, not always, a weapon of opportunity. Meaning, offender breaks in the house to rob it, doesn't expect anybody there. He sees a female in a robe come at him. Hey, what's going on? And he freaks, starts to strangle her. Doesn't work. He grabs a telephone. Remember, telephones back in the day could certainly kill somebody, as heavy and big as they are. And he grabs the receiver and starts beating her. He grabs an iron, beats her. It's a weapon of opportunity. It comes from the residence, and therefore, more than likely, isn't premeditated. In this instance, we have two bodies that were both beaten with a blunt force heavy object, according to police. Now, there's no indication that it came from the house. Could have. But I'm operating off of the assumption it did not. Because it wasn't mentioned. So that means the offender brought it. And remember, the police said that Julie answered the door and was rendered unconscious. Something had to have happened in that doorway for police to formulate that theory. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was blood spatter. Punched in the nose, hit with an object, there's blood there. Julie's blood's there, and it makes sense. She was incapacitated, maybe not knocked out. Okay. What does that tell you? It tells you he had a weapon with him, if that's the case. So we have premeditated thoughts. Julie's answering in a robe, and he is naked, and he's still on bed. So that means that more than likely he was killed in the bed. Now, I believe I read that he was across the bed, meaning he wasn't tucked in the covers. Now, I don't know that for sure, but off of what I read and researched, I go back to why is he not getting out of bed to answer the door? Let me try to tie all this together. Let's fast forward to he abducts Julie, right? He gets her in a car. They drive only a block and a half. But it's now 4:20. What is going on in that vehicle between 3:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m.? That's an hour. And they've only made it a block and a half. That's a heck of an abduction, right? When you think of abduction, hey, you abduct a woman, gone. Take her to wherever you're going to take her. That doesn't occur here. Why? That's a huge red flag to me. You have an offender who just committed murder. Okay, forget about the kidnapping. He just killed somebody. This person he's abducted, husband, left a child screaming in the apartment as well. He doesn't panic. He doesn't flee. He just killed him. He abducts this girl, puts him in the car, and he goes a block and a half for an hour at a minimum. Remember, police said, hey, this happened. She got abducted between 2 and 3:30. So it could actually be 2 hours. And he goes a block and a half with her. What's he doing? Number one, why doesn't he flee the area? You think maybe he's from the area? Secondly, what is he doing? There's only two things that could be happening within that 2-hour period or hour at the minimum. He's sexually assaulting her. And if that happens, what? This is a sexually motivated crime. But we have no indication of that, right? Secondly, he's talking to her. And I believe that is what's occurring. Could be both. But again, I told you that I was going to try to tie this all together and have it make sense. I'm still not 100% sure. But because of A, B, and C, I see this as the answer. At 4:20, remember, they've been talking now for an hour, or she's being sexually assaulted. It's one or the other. She flees, right? At 4:20 a.m., a block and a half from where she was abducted at, 2 hours earlier, or an hour, she escapes. She busts out of that station wagon and she runs to 236 Southwest Laurel Street in Junction City and knocks on that guy's door. Help me, whatever she's saying. He goes, pulls her back in, probably tells her, if you make another word, you already saw what I did to your husband, I will go back and do that to your child. So what's she going to do? She's going to shut up, which is exactly what happened. She didn't say anything. He scared her so much that not only did he place her back in the vehicle where she is silenced, he didn't kill her. He was able to get out, walk over. Oh, she's drunk. Don't worry about it. Take a flashlight, look all over the area for something. Doesn't find it, doesn't panic, gets back in the vehicle. Now he drives further south to the trailer park. Now she's killed. Now he places her body underneath this vehicle. He punctures the gas tank of this person's vehicle. Remember, it's just a random person who also has a station wagon. Station wagons were pretty common back then. He puts her body underneath it, punctures the gas tank where the gas flows on her body. He ignites it, and he escapes, never to be seen again. Except he is seen again. Because you know what he does. After he places her body under there, he goes back on foot and is observed again in that same area where she escaped with his flashlight looking for something. He finds the something he's looking for and he puts it in his pocket. So, as a detective, what is this? This is another lead. All right? I love it. Because now it's like, okay, this kind of, for me, is tying things together. What is he looking for? What did he find? What was so important that, number one, he left her in that car after she just tried to escape? Secondly, now he takes her, he kills her, he puts her under the car, he blows the car up, he drives back 4 blocks to the same place where she just escaped from and was banging on doors. And he's not panicked. He goes back to looking for what he originally was looking for, and this time he finds it and he leaves. There's 2 things that I believe would make him go back. One, something that links him to this murder. Eyeglasses, driver's license, something to that effect. Something that links him to the murders. That if whatever that is found, they got me. Or, secondly, what I tend to believe is more true. Something symbolic. And it's something symbolic to Julie. Like what, you ask? Well, before I answer that, let's go back to where we all started. Back to the Maple Street apartments, right? Where this occurred, where she answers the door in her robe. I was racking my brain as to why she would do this and who would be knocking on the door. Well, number one, remember in the very beginning I said we can learn something from the location. This is an apartment complex where it's like a hotel. Doors very close to one another. Why would an offender choose that particular apartment? They're not rich. They live in an apartment building. Why does he choose that? Is it a robbery? No. No, because there's too much risk there. There's too much risk to burglar that apartment at that time of night with occupants there. You would do it when at least a man's out of the house, right? So again, you can rule that out. What I feel, based off of the evidence, and it's not just one piece, it's the totality of all the pieces, is that at least Julie, maybe not Terry, Julie knew the offender. Now, how I came to this conclusion is one of her answering the door. I believe that this, although could be a sexually motivated crime, there's elements of that. I believe it's more than likely revenge. Now, again, not knowing a lot about Julie's victimology, and you never want to re-victimize anyone, but what you want to do is speak truths. To me, Julie knew who this person was. Because, again, the way she answered the door in a robe, not allowing him to answer, or maybe he never even knew because he was sleeping. If both are sleeping, there's a knock on the door. He doesn't hear it because he just worked all day. She hears it. Why doesn't she wake him up? Hey, there's somebody at the door. Can you go look? It's 3:30 in the morning. She doesn't. She gets up on her own and goes answering it. I believe what happened prior to him getting home at midnight from work is key. I am hesitant, again, because I don't like smearing anybody's name, but I would say there's a possibility that she was having an affair with this gentleman. Use that term loosely. Maybe she was just talking to him. She had talked to him earlier that night, could have talked on the phone, whatever it is. And when she heard that knock on the door, because the guy probably said, listen, maybe they got in an argument over the phone. Maybe he was there. I don't know. But it makes sense to me. Hey, I want you, and he treats you bad. I can do this for you. She's like, no. And it was a big thing. And then at 3:30, there's a knock on the door. She knows 100% who it is because he had already threatened to come and tell the husband or whatever, he said he was going to do. That's why she answers the door and not him. Does that make sense? And in his mind, he was rejected by her earlier. So she answers the door. He hits her, whatever it is, his anger. And where does he go? He doesn't focus on Julie. He goes straight for the husband, straight to the bedroom, and beats him to death with an object that he brought to the house because he intended on killing him. And then walks out and grabs her. I fucking told you so. I told you. Grabs her by the hair, drags her, puts her in the car. Now, we have an 2-hour gap before the next sequence of events happen. Again, is he sexually assaulting her? Maybe. Good possibility. Doesn't mean it's a sexually motivated crime. He wanted her. And it was probably a combination of both. But I think the emphasis is on, just come with me. He's not in the picture now. I told you. Trying to convince her. She's trying to convince him. I don't know. We can work it out. Meaning, we can say this happened or whatever it is. Whatever the conversation is. She's begging for her life. Please don't do this to me. Please don't do this to me. And it goes on. She sees, I would say that she sees that, listen, there's no talking to him. And she escapes after an hour, after 2 hours of this. Escapes to the house, beating on the door. Guy doesn't lose composure. Oh, she's just drunk. Puts her back in there and says, whatever he says to shut her up, probably threatens her child. Goes back, takes a flashlight, looking for something. It's symbolic. And what is that? Is it a ring? Is it a necklace? Is it a pendant? Something to show his love to her? To me, that's more likely than a watch that got knocked off of his hand during a struggle. Because a ring, a pendant, a poem, whatever it is, fits everything else. So now he gets back in the car. He drives a couple minutes south. And in 10 minutes, she's set on fire and strangled and beaten to death. Now, why did he kill her? He doesn't kill her until what? She escapes. In his mind, that's a rejection. Okay? Because that whole hour, 2 hours where they're conversing, who knows? She's begging for her life. Begging for the life of her child. She knows her husband is dead. This isn't good. You know, she's probably trying to placate him, you know. And then she realizes after an hour, after 2 hours of this, he's not going to let me go. I got to make a break for it. And she makes the break. That is what the trigger is for him to kill her. Okay. That's the rejection. I kill you. Now, shoving her under a vehicle. I don't know why. The only thing that I can come up with is that this guy worked on vehicles, whether he was a mechanic. A lot of people worked on their vehicles back then. It was a lot more common. But for him to shove her, the reason he shoves her under a vehicle, I think, is to delay the identification of a body. But this guy was so calm. This offender was so calm during all this. After he puts her back in the car, it's almost as if, I don't want to use the word panic sets in, but it's almost unnecessary. He could have just strangled her and beat her and dumped her along the road. It's 4:00 in the morning, you know. But he purposely puts her underneath a vehicle in this trailer park. Now, you have to ask yourself, why are we in a trailer park? What's the significance of this? And I don't think that there is. I think it was just a location along the way. I mean, just like they only made it a block and a half. So I don't think the location of that is relevant. But him puncturing the gas tank with a screwdriver or you know, it could be a knife, but I doubt it. If it was a knife, I think he would have used that on her. But whatever he punctured it with and then set it on fire, that is not to... He puts her under the car to, in his mind, it delays the finding of the body, not the identification. He sets the car on fire, not to destroy evidence. It's to destroy her. Okay? I think, I don't know if his intention when he put her under there was to set her on fire. I think that might have been a secondary revelation to him. Because it takes a lot to take a dead weight, a body, at least 100 pounds, and either carry it, push it out the passenger side of the vehicle, and then roll it underneath a vehicle. So you're doing that to delay the finding of it. But then does he say, oh, I'm going to set it on fire? Because what's a fire do? It does two things. You're going to destroy her body, which I think that's what he wanted to do. But two, counterintuitive to that, is that it draws attention. You're going to have an explosion, you're going to have flames, and it's going to be quick. But that doesn't deter him. Why? Because in his mind, I believe he was so enraged after she rejected him and ran that he wanted to destroy her looks, destroy everything about her. I believe that I read that the police say they have a suspect in this. I'd be very curious to know whether it was somebody that she knew, because I believe that this is. I believe this was a case of, if I can't have you, nobody's going to have you. And I think the guy probably had a little bit of something wrong with him mentally, where in his mind he almost thought that, hey, I'm a hero kinda if I kill the husband and take her. Maybe she'll see that as my undying love for her. I really don't believe this is a stranger abduction murder. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I would say that it is possible that somebody was stalking her, and then did this, but I don't think it goes back to her answering the door in a robe. I just don't think she would do that. Maybe I'm wrong, and Victimology would tell you that, but again, back to 1970, I think she was talking to somebody at the very minimum. And whoever she was talking to either took it the wrong way or there was something there between the two. And he just wanted more. And that's what happened here. That's how I see this case. Could be totally wrong. It was very interesting. It's so interesting that everything happened within, like a 5-block radius or whatever, right there. From the abduction, again, I'd like to know why they say 2 to 3:30. Was there a witness that saw something there at the Maple Street Apartments? Or how did they come up with that? And then he spends all that time with her. And again, you look at these maps and it looks like everything is so, there's houses everywhere. Well, it's 50 years ago. More than that. 55 years ago. There was less populated. There wasn't all these houses there, I'm betting. The trailer park is gone now. So, I mean, he could pull off once he abducts her, and there's probably a lot of secluded type of spots. It's a shame because she knew she was in trouble. And it seems like she spent a couple hours trying to convince him not to go through with this. I had a case one time in Lycoming County when I was on the job where a girl, she was getting a divorce from her husband, and he abducted her from the house, drove her around for a couple hours, and then killed her, and then set the vehicles on fire. So, I mean, it is similar to this. And maybe subconsciously I was thinking about that case and didn't even realize it. because there is a lot of parallels to that. And I remember when I was on the job, I had to go out and I was retracing the route because he was on electronic monitoring. He was on parole or probation. So he had an ankle monitor on, I think. And that's how we were able to trace his routes and where he drove her to and where her body ended up being. So, yeah, that was there. And again, in that case, I believe that she was trying to convince him not to do what he was going to do. And this guy was hardcore. Because if I remember right, he may have shot her, but he burned himself up with her, right? Anyways, that's what I think happened here. Let's go over the template and see if I missed anything. Julie and Terry Dade, 20 and 19-year-old respectively. 121 of 70, Tuesday going into a Wednesday. He was quiet. She was attractive. Both were beat to death with heavy instrument. She was strangled as well. The timeline. Greed, sex, or revenge. I have sex and revenge. I have a ring in a question marks as evidence. Something that meant enough for him to look twice. I can't get over that. How calm this offender was, and he went back to that area and looked for something. Something between when she escaped from the vehicle and went to that person's house and started knocking on the door and the time that he drug her back. They lost something. He lost something. What was that? I says it's either connected him to the crime or was symbolic to him and her. And because he went and looked for it twice before he found it. And it was small enough that the witness said he put it in his pocket. I have, he had a criminal history. Now, the reason I wrote that, and I'm not dead set on that, but I wrote it initially because of him destroying, I thought, at the time, evidence by puncturing the gas tank. And my thought process was he has been to jail before. He's been caught before by not destroying evidence. He got caught because of some type of evidence, fingerprints or whatever. So now he's going to destroy it, but I'm not so sure about that now. Red flags. From 2 a.m. to 4:20 a.m., they only made it 1.5 blocks. The Terry was nude. The puncturing of the gas tank. Searching again 2 times before he found it, put it in his pocket. The deductions that I have here was that the offender may have lived in the area, but for some reason he didn't take her to his house. Which to me, I initially wrote down here that he was probably married as well. And that was the reason after he abducted her, he didn't take Julie to his house. But that's not necessarily true because, again, if it was a sexually motivated crime, then yes. But if it's not, and it's revenge, then he has no reason to take Julie to his house. So I couldn't deduce anything from that. Definitely an anger, rage, retaliatory type of killing. He was rejected by her. And that might have happened twice. Earlier in the evening during a phone call, wherever it was. And then again when she fled the vehicle. In his mind, he was stealing her from husband. It's premeditated. We went over that because of the weapon. It's not a robbery because of the location, the apartment buildings. He decides to kill her only, and I have here capital letters underlined, only after she flees. And again, that's because in his mind, that was the final rejection. I have here, she knew him. Miscellaneous. She was having possibly an affair but she wouldn't leave her husband or child. And she told him that, and that's what triggered all this and started it off. Um, Again, big red flag here. She answers the door, not the husband. And then I have an arrow to talked or was with the offender that night while the husband was at work. And the reason, because I have the arrow going to she answers the door and not him. Tough case, but I think to me that makes sense. Now, again, these assessments could certainly change if more information became relevant. You know, if you get the police reports and it says that he wasn't naked, he actually answered the door. The media gets things wrong, believe it or not. Okay? But from what I saw, and a lot of these newspaper articles that I saw came directly from the police department's website. So I would think that they are credible because the police wouldn't put them on their website if they were wrong, right? It's wrong, right? But I digress. I think that this makes the most sense. Now, again, you never want to victim shame, and I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is trying to do a criminal assessment of what makes sense based off of the totality of the evidence. And remember that evidence doesn't have to be direct evidence, doesn't have to be physical evidence. It could be indirect evidence. It could be circumstantial evidence. And because of that, it's almost, I call it crime scene assessment. But essentially what it is criminal profiling. You know, except, you know, I'm not giving, okay, it's a white male, age 25, 30. Hey, in this instant, we know that it was a male who was husky, and he had on, obviously, a heavy coat because it was winter, and he had boots on. He drove a white station wagon, and that stuff. So it's not a criminal profile, but I like to see it's worked like a criminal profile. For me, crime scene assessing is like criminal profiling. You're deducing possibilities, the probabilities, in order to get to the answer. And you do that through the totality of all the evidence. Indirect, direct, circumstantial, doesn't matter. Until it formulates an opinion. And based off of everything that I see, I think this is more than likely a revenge type killing of a male who wanted her. He was either having an affair with her or she was talking to him and he took it too far. And listen, she may not have been having an affair with him physically, but she was talking to him. And she may have been just talking friendly. And he took it too far, meaning he took it the wrong way. She may have said, you know, you're so nice to talk to, this and that. My husband doesn't talk to me. He works all the time. Boy, I wish I had somebody like you sometimes. And that's all it took in this offender's mind. Okay? So I'm not saying that he certainly had a physical affair. In his mind, it was. And it meant something to him. But for her, it could have been completely innocent. And I'm not blaming her. Without a doubt, I'm not blaming her. Because I don't know enough yet. But working the case backwards, from the fire, underneath, all the way back to the Laurel Street address where he's searching for something. She tries to run, the rejection to him. Back to the abduction, the husband being naked, her being in the robe. When you work things backwards, that's what I see for this case. A very sad case of Julie and Terry Dade. And let's not forget the little child who is grown up now, who had to endure this, probably has no memories of his mom and dad. And that is probably the biggest tragedy, besides these victims not living a full life. You know, sometimes we forget that. You know, they're just names on a paper or photographs. Sometimes we forget, you know, these are real human beings who had families. I just hope that this helps somebody. That's the whole goal of all of this, all the time, is that somebody sees it and contacts the police department, contacts me, whatever it is, and says they have information. Because it's been so long and allegiances change, loyalties change. Somebody that you were scared of in 1970, you're no longer scared of. Therefore, you can give the information that you know. And it's all for the victims' families, and the police department and the community in which it happened. To finally give resolution to the victims and the families. This is a very sad case. Very sad case. Yet, this is what I see on Unsolved No More. Thanks for watching. Main's out.